You've been dreaming a long time, haven't you?
Have you never prayed that time would simply stop?
The opening of Final Fantasy X is one of the busiest starts to a game you'll find. Very little time is wasted as you're plunged into a world overflowing with imagination. Fans rush to a stadium with a hanging sphere of water at the center of the playing field for a sport that you could only have dreamt up. Heavy guitar riffs tear into your soul. We pan above a city nested at sea, its buildings accented with tiny waterfalls. A man in red stands above it as the ocean somehow dances in the sky behind him. He seems to toast his drink to a gargantuan wall of water on the horizon. Strangely, the city seems to warp and distort at its presence. Gravity gets a little sleepy. And without warning, something hiding inside the tsunami attacks, desperately wounding the city. The sphere of water shatters and falls. Statues and buildings crumble, sirens sound, people cower in terror, and eventually, our seeming main character, Titus, finds himself hanging on for dear life at the feet of the man in red, Auron. We get a breathtaking wide shot of the calamity, and with no explanation, Auron looks up to it to ask,
"You are sure?"
Moments later, they are both somehow peeled out of this existence and into another. They travel through space or time or reality. It's impossible to say this early in the game, but this opening act uses those tiny details to leave you with a pile of unanswered questions. The opening scene of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is largely similar in its approach. Children rush through a crowd on the way to an event of some kind to see the fireworks. But when the clock strikes the end of the hour, everything just pauses for one of them. Birds freeze mid-flight, footsteps halt, the wind itself seems to have choked still. His eyes search the plaza, confused and terrified. He turns to the horizon as another planet barrels toward his own. After this, we somehow arrive at a battlefield with no explanation for what has just occurred. 1000 times resist in its beginning moments, literally the first seconds of the game, open with this scene. Someone utters a prayer to an unseen god, then asks why she is getting interrupted. The camera pans back, presumably to your character. You are given a dialogue option that you have no possible way of knowing the correct answer to, and then...
Hair to hair, mother. I really am just like you.
Neva opens with a bird freshly fallen from the sky, rotting in an almost beautiful way. Upon discovering this, seconds later, the main character Alma and her wolves are attacked by some non-specific evil that claws away at her furry friends. When she awakens, one beast has died. It's immediately heartbreaking and a daring way to open a game. These journeys all do something that I've always really admired in storytelling. They present pieces of information that will seem mostly unrelated for a good handful of the story, but suddenly become startlingly important in the end when you finally realize their relevance. They give you full circle endings. And harmoniously, they are also games that revolve around a cycle, a never-ending pattern that casts a shadow over the narrative, one that you and your friends as the heroes of these stories will attempt to break. And as video games go on its own, that's a very vanilla plot structure, right? There is a great evil, it has our friends trapped and suffering for generations, let's break it and live free of that oppression. You see it all across storytelling, not just video games. The Matrix, The Prince of Egypt, The Hunger Games, your Monday morning alarm clock. The cycle of tyranny is certainly not a trope that any of these games came up with, but they are stories that have somehow made me wonder what it would be like to be the tyrant, which is not what I expected out of them. I never related to Ramesses growing up, you know? I've never thought it would be cool to be Mother Gothel and keep someone trapped for their entire life just so that I could remain forever young. No, that's horrible. Actual, palpable evil. And yet somehow these titles used their cycles and those cryptic openings to not just make me feel like a liberator or a savior, but instead make me feel closer to the villain and better understand them. In moments of weakness during playing these, I genuinely think I would have chosen what these games describe as the morally wrong decision. I would have been the catalyst that plunges these worlds into these horrible cycles. And I know how this sounds, but don't worry, playing these games will not turn you into a supervillain, or worse, a politician, or worse, an Elfeld But I do think they will better help you understand a very specific fleck of human imperfection in your soul, and maybe better understand yourself and others. I know they did for me. This is going to be one of those videos that hopefully has us both crying in the club once we wrap it up. Today, we're talking about games that don't just illustrate a cycle of suffering, but that show how that cycle began, and why empathizing with the evil is just as important as being inspired by the good. There will be some mild and some major spoilers for quite a few titles in this, but there will be well-marked timestamps throughout. These two generally illustrate the same point, so if you skip one and watch the other, you'll be fine. But honestly, most of the spoilers are so vague that I really don't think it'll tarnish a first-time playthrough. So just give it a go and use your judgment. Or, you could just completely throw caution to the wind and let me take you for a ride. When Titus wakes up, he finds himself in a world completely alien to his own. His city, Zanarkand, allegedly was destroyed 1,000 years ago. So as the player, it seemingly becomes clear, somehow you've traveled 1,000 years into the future. That thing that attacked Zanarkand is called sin, and the people of Spira have been suffering its wrath ever since. The cycle that Final Fantasy X presents is Sin's constant defeat and reappearance because unfortunately, Sin cannot be defeated, at least not permanently. A summoner must go on a pilgrimage across Spira in order to collect powerful beings called Aeons, and eventually summon the final Aeon, a force that will banish Sin for 10 years. The people call that decade the Calm, a period of respite from the calamity. Once the calm is over, Sin will return, a new summoner must rise, and the cycle begins anew. In the rotation of the cycle that Titus happens upon, he meets a summoner in training named Yuna, whose father was the last person to banish Sin. Titus agrees to be one of her guardians for her pilgrimage, and the two of them, being the youngest and often most naive of the group, hit it off. Each grew up in the shadow of a wildly successful father. Both are overwhelmed in their own way. Yuna under the pressure of potentially saving her world, and Titus coming to grips with being literally torn from his. They relate to each other in a way that the rest of the crew simply cannot. And as the narrative unfolds, we see them grow together. We see them confide in one another and find peace in each other's presence. Their conversations are warm and light. This laugh scene you've probably seen, by the way. In context, is not terrible voice acting. Yuna is trying to cheer Titus up and asks him to force a laugh. He does, she joins in, and afterwards they share a genuine laugh at how insane that just was to do in front of their friends. It's even performed this way in the Japanese version. And it's scenes like this that make you fall in love with seeing them together. But because of the ever-growing threat of Sin, as well as other hints about what exactly happens when Yuna summons the final Aeon, you as the player find yourself desperately wanting them to slow down, to just remain in these tender moments. With every new leg of the journey and every new revelation, you can't seem to shake the feeling that this can't last. Fearing that, you almost wish they'd forget this journey and just build a life together. Let another summoner beat Sin. Don't go back to Zanarkand. Don't go forward to Sin. You want them to just stay here. And I want you to remember that tug in your chest, because it's going to be very important later. Xenoblade 3's cycle also revolves around a decade. The people of Keves and Agnes, two ever-warring nations, have 10-year lifespans that somehow begin in adolescence. In that time, all they know is combat and watching their friends die at the hands of the enemy. You kill the other side, you get to absorb their life force back into your side and keep on living. If you make it to 10 years, you are celebrated and quote-unquote sent back to the queen in a grand ceremony. These individuals live in order to die. And whereas Final Fantasy X spends most of the game discovering the details of its cycle and then seeking to break it later on, Xenoblade makes it very clear early on that this must end. Two small squads from each side, Noah, Lanz, and Uni, Mio, Tyon, and Senna, after fighting discover that they are evenly matched. All of them exhausted, Noah begins to question to both sides why they're doing this.
Why are you fighting me?
Fate suddenly intervenes as a strange man steps in to stop the violence, claiming that their real foe is Mobius. Mobius is the reason for all of the fighting. After finding that they're stronger together, the six of them put their differences aside and try to end this war. And in the first half of the game, we don't get a ton of explanation as to what Mobius precisely is. There are clues over time. Many Mobius members are old while our party is clearly young.
He's so different from us.
All wrinkled.
But while the threads of this mystery slowly unravel, you of course get to know these characters quite well. Tyon and Uni slowly become best friends. Lanz and Senna challenge one another to break out of the shadows of their past together. You get to watch the walls between Noah and Mio crumble as they learn to trust one another. As the offseers of their squads, they've been charged with sending off all of their friends to look those gruesome endings in the eye every time. They've intimately seen death more than anyone else, and who here can possibly relate to that more than each other? And like Titus and Yuna, you can't help but get swept off your feet at their sweet little interactions and how much they respect one another and continually amaze one another. But like Final Fantasy X, you get the feeling that this cannot last, as it becomes hard to ignore the fact that Mio's decade is nearly finished. She has 2 months left. Much like 10, there is this dissonance between what Mio wants, which is to hurry up and go end the war, and what you, the player, want, for things to slow down, to not rush this journey because you don't want to see her go in case the cycle can't be broken. You don't want Noah to lose her. And you kind of see this manifest in him as well. In one scene where Noah wants to take their time and be very careful, Mio is panicking because she can't afford to lollygag or be too strategic.
Take what easy. We rest today, and tomorrow, before I know it, it'll be time.
She wants her final days to matter. And of course, you want them to matter too, but also, can't we just stay here a little bit longer? Surely we can afford to wait some, right? The prison chapter in Xenoblade 3 is not your typical prison chapter. In Chrono Trigger, you break out in a fun stealth sequence. In Wind Waker, you just find a hole in the wall. But here, no one comes to bail you out. There is no game to be played. Our heroes, in a narrative where time is more precious than any other resource, are trapped in jail literally until Mio's homecoming. This is where she will spend her final 2 months. Not laughing with her friends, realizing her true feelings on a magical evening in the woods, not admiring a sunset with Noah, but here, all alone in a cell adjacent to her friends. Your heart shatters as after weeks of silence, she finally speaks with Noah through the wall.
I'd like to spend that time with my Noah.
It's a bitter reminder of what could have been, what should be, if not for this evil cycle. Time marches toward the end, and every fiber of your being wishes that time could simply stop, that you wouldn't be forced to say goodbye. And by design, it's this exact desire that you are feeling as this plays out that created the cycle that is now causing these emotions. This is N, one of the big bad villains of Xenoblade 3, the one who captured and imprisoned Noah and the crew. And at the dramatic conclusion of this chapter, he, or perhaps Noah himself, experiences a vision. a reel of never-ending memories. Noah and Mio have lived and died countless times over history, constantly re-feeding into this cycle with no memory of their previous lives until this moment. In their previous decade lifespans, they've been married, had children, fallen in love over and over again. They've found their way to each other in each instance, and Noah, without fail, continues to watch her die. Maybe it was in combat, maybe it was due to sickness, maybe her decade was up, maybe it was instead having to say goodbye to their child. But after suffering the loss of the ones he loves most, this Noah is given a chance to do what we have been silently screaming for this entire game, to simply stop, to stay with Mio and no longer be subject to the pain of loss and suffering, to no longer be chained to the ravages of sorrow and time, to never have to say goodbye again. And it would have been very possible for him to walk away like a typical video game hero. This isn't right, I can't accept it if it's not real, but like a human, like I would likely also do if I were given the chance to never have to say goodbye to my wife, he takes it.
So you have chosen then. The endless now.
And it's at this moment that he, like so many others, becomes Mobius, becomes in, and feeds into the cycle of suffering. Not because he is a biblical slave driver or the head of a corrupt government, but because he's human. Because the pain of loss has stripped him of all reason. This is likely exactly how one might feel after seeing their home be destroyed, as Zanarkand is. And it's from this piercing sorrow that the cycle of sin begins in Spira. Much of what I'm about to tell you is buried in the subtext. It's less direct of an illustration as we get in Xenoblade, but it sort of all starts to become clear when Titus touches this wall of statues near the peak of Mount Gagazet. Statues that hold the souls of people who willingly sacrifice themselves to be sealed away. Their latent desires are the power source that summoners use to call forth aeons. A fate perhaps not better, but certainly different than death. They call them faith, souls that have not moved on. And after touching one, Titus falls into a sudden dream of his home. For the first time since the start of the game, he is back in Zanarkand. During his time there, he speaks with one of those faith. We find out that 1,000 years ago, there was a war, not where sin attacked, but where sin was created. Zanarkand was lost in this war, and so to preserve it, those that survived willingly chose to become faith and summon a dream state Zanarkand, one that really exists just like aeons, one that exists in the current day, but is hidden far away at sea. The very same Zanarkand we see at the start. But to maintain that dream, sin had to be created to protect it, and to protect the summoner inside, summoning that dream. Titus's Zanarkand can only exist so long as sin exists. This dream that the people have wished for, out of the unyielding despair of losing their home, is their endless now. Their way out of facing this tragedy. Like in, they don't move on. They can't accept saying goodbye. They simply want to stay. Don't you? These are not the first games to illustrate the pain of loss, nor are they the first to explore characters that can't accept that loss. All of Silent Hill 2 is a disturbing illustration of James's inability to deal with the loss of his wife, Mary. The town itself is a metaphysical manifestation of the repressed trauma and denial that she is really gone. He comes to the town because he believes he can find her there. Throughout much of the game, he desperately, almost delusionally holds fast to the notion that she could still be alive.
Mary? You're not.
In Hellblade, we guide Senua on a journey to find the soul of her lost lover, Dillion. She believes that the Norse gods have taken him, and so she drags herself through uncanny visions and encounters with living nightmares, again, all for the sake of finding what has been lost and bringing it back, all in order to escape the agonizing reality. These games all arrive at the same conclusion: refusal to let go, insistence upon never letting a memory stay a memory, only leads to ruin. These are the morally wrong decisions. You will only destroy yourself and those around you. To some degree, some of us may have experienced this in our own lives. Maybe a previous failed relationship leads you to close up emotionally for risk of getting hurt again. Perhaps you've lost someone and life hasn't been the same since. You can't move on. How could you? And because of this, your bonds to those you still have suffered. Maybe it's as simple as marinating on your past mistakes and living your life looking in the rearview mirror. Maybe you have lost your home. Maybe you have every right to feel this way. These games illustrate these emotions through big, magnanimous metaphors, larger-than-life paintings of grief and resignation. Fear becomes a never-ending war. Sorrow becomes an infinite calamity. Grief becomes a bloody, putrid vortex of a town. Agony becomes a feverish journey into hell. And yet, in so many ways, they contradict that by making you feel the exact emotion that they caution against. They say don't get attached, then make you get attached. They tell you to move on after making it hard to move on, which is something that Persona 5 does in a much more subtle way, because it asks you, what if your endless now didn't create a cycle of suffering? What if you could remain in a perfect world that didn't cost anyone anything? What if you could stay here and not be blamed for it? I'm going to tell you about one of the Persona 5 DLC endings. Now, before you skip, just hang on a second. This will tell you so incredibly little about the game. I promise this is actually a minor spoiler. I won't even utter any characters' names. No giant plot twists. You could almost file this away on the same level as like an Easter egg. Trust me. There is a dialogue option in the Royal DLC that, should you choose to accept, will give you an ending. And I can't really say it's the bad ending, but to call it the true ending would be a strict lie. You are given the chance to give everyone a perfect life. Instead of beating the game's final enemy, you can accept their offer and all the people most important to you heal from their traumas and insecurities. The wrongs are magically righted. You wake up in the middle of a party with all of your friends and family there. Relationships have healed, dreams have come true. Everyone is laughing and smiling. The oldest of the group are graduating. Others are moving to your school next semester. You take a group photo and everyone seems genuinely joyous. You've earned this. There is no more evil anymore. This is how things should be. Nothing is wrong anymore. Right? If you haven't played this game and you just happened upon these credits, you'd probably think that it's the real ending. I mean, just look at these lovely illustrations, listen to this delightful music. What a nice game this must have been. But once the pictures end, you realize that the credits have been rolling at a strange angle, almost indicating that something is off. Finally, we arrive at the end screen, where again, all smiles, but your character in particular glares at the camera with a hauntingly rehearsed expression. Something is wrong. This small alternative ending, instead of showing you the repercussions of not letting go on a grand scale, instead indulges you. It says, sure, have it your way. This is perfection. Do you want to stay here forever? And it's fascinating to see the amount of real humans that stand by it in message boards. Hot take, this is the best ending. There's nothing wrong with this ending. This is the ending everyone deserves. And yeah, you know, like how can you not be incredibly tempted by it? It opens up a whole fascinating dialogue, and perhaps it's a wake-up call if you are stuck in your own real world endless now. You might think, yeah, but that's not real. These aren't real characters. People aren't flawless. These aren't humans. They're hollowed out approximations of them. Every scar and lesson that makes them who they are has been stripped away. We learn nothing in this timeline. And that, to me, is why this ending is so brilliant. It doesn't paint a picture of empathetic sorrow, it paints a picture of bleached perfection, so incredibly perfect that it's vexing. It makes us want to tilt it crooked on the wall, to graffiti it, to tarnish it, to make it better reflect what is real, because reality, that is where we mature, where life is really lived. As much as I want to, I can't stay here, actually. You can't keep me here. 1000 Times Resist is about so many things. Finding a way to fit it into a video is like trying to decide on what you want for dinner after that first paycheck of the month. There's just too many possibilities. It's a narrative that takes place over several generations, but its cycle is a little murkier at first glance. As the game gets started and we move on from that cryptic stabby opening, you will play as Watcher, one of the several sisters in this perfect little garden. Everyone has their role. Everyone is happy. It is sterile. It is pure. It is creepy. Nothing is ever wrong. Everyone here lives in service to the All-Mother, the one from whom all the sisters come from. Some unseen person that, if you're good, if you do your job well, you will have the opportunity to meet. In fact, you'll join her outside of the garden in her fight against the big evil occupants, aliens that now reside on the surface and make it impossible to live without these masks. The All-Mother, however, in her infinite benevolence, again, if you are worthy, will give you immunity from the occupants' toxin, and in time, you, her, and all of the other worthy sisters will reclaim the world. That is the vision that Watcher and her best friend Fixer believe the day that Fixer is chosen to join the All-Mother. However, as the game progresses, you begin to see the loose threads in this grand tapestry. Watcher, doing her job by watching, is presented with the All-Mother's memories for the sake of preserving history. And it's in those memories that something begins to stink. The All-Mother, as it turns out, was once nothing more than a high school girl named Iris, who was somehow immune to the occupant's toxin and now can no longer age. And from the last remaining human, somehow we got here. And she kind of sucks. She's horrible to her only real friend. She wants to leave her mother and father, as many rebellious teens do. She is the origin of this whole religion, and without spoiling too much, she is a very flawed god, which Fixer actually warned you of after the first memory you explore. Mother is not all she is hyped up to be.
Iris? Kind of bad news.
And like Persona 5's false ending, you might begin to feel that desire to peel yourself away from it and accept the uncomfortable truth. This perfect structure needs to be broken. And you'll follow Watcher's journey of discovery in the far distant future as she rebels against the All-Mother. And you'll follow Iris's journey as she rebels against her mother. And you'll follow Iris's mother as she rebels against her mother. And you'll follow Iris's father as he rebels against the Hong Kong government in 2019, where during a protest he meets Iris's mother. And you'll follow Secretary as they... The central conflict in most of the games we've discussed today revolves around those in favor of the cycle, those who want to stay in the endless now where it's safe from all pain and suffering for them, and those who wish to break it, whether they benefit from that cycle or not. Most of these stories take the time to ensure that you empathize with both sides. Again, what they do supremely well is not make you feel like a liberator, but instead, on a very personal level, help you better understand how cycles of suffering begin so that you can break them in yourself and perhaps inspire others to do the same. 1000 Times Resist teeters on this conflict as well. Some characters understand that the All-Mother's world, while built on lies and pain and sorrow, is comfortable. Others simply cannot ignore the implications of just lying down and ignoring the injustice for the sake of preserving a perfect farce. Watcher cannot ignore the suffering that this reality was built upon. Iris cannot stay complacently with her parents when the world needs her immunity to develop a cure for the occupant's toxin. Iris's mother cannot stay in a country that does not allow her to live the life she truly wants. The people of Hong Kong cannot stand idly by and allow their government to subjugate its population. This game is a gorgeous story told over thousands of years, whose cycle is actually one of repeatedly breaking cycles, of resisting 1,000 times over if necessary. Mothers and daughters, people and governments, followers and religions. Never accepting to stay in an endless now, never forfeiting a future that their grandchildren will inherit, rejecting comfort in lieu of choice and growth. Despite the pain that may come with it, seeing history repeat itself in this ever-rebellious fashion boisterously echoes the point of everyone who can't accept the false Persona 5 ending. As tempting as it is to slip into this blissful fantasy, as hard as it is to say goodbye, that is the only way we truly grow. And I use the word grow by design because the final game we're talking about today takes these themes and views them through the lens of Mother Nature. Neva, as I mentioned earlier, begins with a funeral. Evil has taken one of your wolves, and you only have one left. A pup named
Neva.
And through the game, you see Neva grow. You go from protecting her and worrying about her to fighting alongside her and worrying about her. She, of course, is the thing you don't want to lose here. She is the Yuna, the Mio, the Dillian, the Mary, the damn it, if the dog dies, I don't want to play this. And as you explore this vibrant world, you find that nature is behaving in some suspicious ways. At the very start of the game, this bird doesn't just die, it's somehow preserved in haunting ashen flowers. Trees don't fall to the ground and decompose, they just hang in the air in this bizarre in-between state. Herons remain captured in a single heartbeat, wings spread but not flying, beaks open but hushed. Boars are frozen like statues mid-roar with black roses blooming on their snouts. Things don't die here, they turn into something else. It's beautiful, but also somehow profane and wrong. Sometimes corpses will attack you as these vile creatures possess them and make them dance like puppets, and you'll notice that defeating these creatures actually makes them return to the earth. Real flowers and vines sprout up over their bodies, allowing them to finally rest. And this is kind of how Neva's central conflict is presented. It's not death you're fighting against. Death is peaceful. It's this malicious force that wants to preserve things in an almost perfect fashion. Cheap imitations of life are what you often fight against. This is Neva's endless now. Evil here takes the form of a sorrowful denial. This is prettier than death, surely. This way we can always admire the herons flying, the deer running, the forest's leaves, the wolves we cherish so deeply.
Neva.
And again, this game ensures that you are horrified at the idea of losing Neva. There is this dream sequence where Alba, the main character, sees a wolf on the horizon, a blackened, undead, unsent wolf. And you might interpret this as Alba's fear of losing Neva, of course, but it could also be a dream where she fights off the temptation to let Neva be taken by the Black Malice, to never have to say goodbye like she did before. It's a tale that highlights the fragility of life, and that despite how excruciating it is to let go, to do anything beyond simply mourn it and move on is unnatural, a violation of nature, a profane desire that, although understandable, must be plucked in order to thrive. To truly live, you must wake up from the dream.
It's not that you're dreaming.
The cryptic openings that I mentioned at the start of this video all serve the same purpose, to both set up a full circle ending as well as, in some ways, contradict the game's message. Not to invalidate it, but to purposely pull you in two directions to show you that this message, while an ideal and while an inspiring way to live your life, doesn't make choosing it easy. If it were, you would not relate to the villain, you would not admire the hero, the cycle would not have begun. These beginnings must come full circle, and they don't patronize you by telling you that letting go is painless. They remind you specifically what it will cost. What I didn't tell you earlier about that dream Titus has is that when he realizes he's dreaming and points it out, the Faith makes a critical clarification to what he says.
It's not that you're dreaming. You are a dream.
In the final act of the game, it slowly becomes clear that when sin is defeated, when Yu Yevon is defeated, when the Faith are all finally allowed to rest and the dream ends, that Titus himself will also end. He will disappear along with his city. Sin attacked Dream Zanarkand at the very start in order to break the cycle so that the Faith may finally rest and end the millennium of destruction, all unbeknownst to Titus, a man who never truly existed. Breaking the cycle may have saved Yuna, but tragically, it cost Titus his place in this world. And in one of the most genuinely heartbreaking endings to a video game I will likely ever see, I'm still kind of recovering from it like 15 years later, Yuna must let him go. Titus must smile in the face of his own demise with the knowledge that he has just secured the futures of the people he loves most. Desperately, Yuna throws herself at him to keep him from leaving, but it's too late. The cycle is broken. The dream is over. The two worlds colliding at the very beginning of Xenoblade 3 is actually the moment that the Endless Now begins. The pausing of everything around Noah signals the beginning of 1,000 years of Mobius, where the two worlds of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 have leaked into one another. Through some JRPG shenanigans, this is how the Great Pause begins. And as you get closer to the end of the game, it becomes clear that rejecting Mobius and attempting to end the Endless Now in fact means that the worlds must separate again. Everyone here will return to their own worlds. And while this means no more cycle of war or 10-year lifespans, it also means that this magical crossing of the timelines will be no more. Senna and Lanz are forced to say goodbye. Tyon gives Uni an herbal tea recipe to help with her anxieties. She won't wake up with it when they return to their worlds, but that doesn't matter. Noah and Mio, God damn it. And as the worlds begin to tear apart at the seams, that temptation to stay comes rushing back. They all begin running toward one another at a full sprint, but the ground beneath them, the air they breathe, the leaves and the trees all sort themselves back where they belong as the Endless Now becomes the inescapable Then. In the final act of Neva, we have a new pup. Neva has found love, started a family, and now she, Alba, and Bruma roam this forest at the peak of springtime. It's lush, it's warm, it's tender, and it mirrors the start of the game, because after all, this is a cycle. Another bird falls, the wicked forces return, but this time, Neva and her pup prevail, finally putting that malice to rest. However, Neva is still mortally wounded. Alba wakes to a scene that is all too familiar. Neva is gone now. The malice that was plaguing the land is gone, but it cost Alba her dearest friend. But just like the start of the game, a new beginning and a new life awaits. These endings all make you hurt and cry and scream because they're real. The lesson these games want to tell cannot be told otherwise. Saying goodbye cannot be easy. It would be almost condescending to suggest that letting go is simple or clean. And it's because of this that we relate to the tyrant. It's because of this we're tempted to accept that false ending. It's because of this that presenting these feelings as a cycle is so tragically effective. When we can't move on, nothing changes. When we don't want to move on, we continually invite the same pattern of behavior, shutting down, indulging the comfort of apathy, never resisting an opportunity to wallow. The same habits swaddle us. The same thoughts visit us. Sorrow can be addicting in small doses, especially if it keeps us from getting hurt again. But it's because of these reasons we so deeply admire the heroes of these stories. We revere our friends in Xenoblade because they know what breaking the cycle means and choose to move forward in spite of what it will cost them. Our heart aches so much for Titus because we feel the gravity of his decision as he creates a bright future instead of indulging a sweet dream. We find inspiration in all of Iris's ancestors as through the generations they continually refuse to be imprisoned by convenience and indifference. They fight for a future that they can thrive in, not a falsely perfect ending. Life may end in Neva, but it is also always a new beginning. Life sprouts up from the loam. A new generation will live and love and have tender moments of their own because we chose to move forward. We inspired them to do the same. We looked toward the horizon with tears in our eyes and invited the endless then, a then that they'll receive. These games illustrated something about myself that I feel like I understand now. They inspired me to break that cycle, and maybe they'll do the same for you. I hope you never forget that beautiful now, but never stop looking for more of them. Gaze toward that endless road ahead of you, and just walk on. Hey there you, thanks so much for watching. Happy New Year! It's good to be back. I've wanted to talk about JRPGs in depth for so long now, and after playing Xenoblade and seeing the parallels to Final Fantasy X, it had to happen. 10 was probably my first ever man game, if I'm being honest. 6th grade Daryl felt so many things he didn't even know he could feel back then. If you like what you saw today, leave a like, share the video, subscribe, comment what you're feeling down below, and if you love what you saw today, consider joining my Patreon page. For $1 a month, you can get access to all kinds of bonus content like bloopers, creative input, updates, editing streams, etc. You might even get a shout out like this month's featured patrons. Barry Tones, Elu the Derp, CDD JKH Huang, Asgard, Kevin Craner, AG, Lenny 0451, and Michael Ware. Thanks again for watching, take care, and have yourself a damn good one. Tiny backlog update to anyone that recommended Yakuza 0 to me. I just want to let you know, I am so sorry for sleeping on this game. I fucking love it. It's incredible. Why is it so good?